Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of Rainer on Leadership, a podcast for established church leaders as well as leadership anywhere. My name is Josh.
My name is Sam. Josh, you're fired.
All right, well, I'll see you later.
You remember the remember the TV show with Donald Trump? Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's the way, my generation was introduced to Donald Trump, was primarily through The Apprentice.
You're
money,
fired.
money, money, money.
So I want to be very empathetic and understanding with this episode, because if you've ever felt this pain, then, it's not fun at all, right? No. So I want to make sure that we show the respect to people that they deserve. I've been there. So I've been through, a forced resignation, which is just a cowardly version of getting fired. Like they can't do it on their own, so they're just going to make you resign. Still don't know how I feel about that, but hey,
well, we can talk about it in this episode just a little bit. But like you said, it does happen, and we want to be respectful of it. But before we dive into the topic, we need to talk a little bit about church teams.
Well, Southern Seminary. We'll talk about church teams at the end. So
let's flip them around. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So we'll do Southern first, and then we'll do church teams. And both are sponsors. They're both great sponsors. We'll tell you more about church teams at the end, so hang on for that. But yeah, if you've been in ministry a while, there are obstacles, there are opportunities. What are the solutions? Where do you find them? You find them at Southern Seminary. At least that's one place that we recommend. And they have a new D-Min that you need to go check it out. It's a great opportunity for you to get practical help for your church. So the D-Min program you can find out more at sbts.edu/solutions. That's plural, solutions, sbts.edu/solutions. You can just also go to SBTS, Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, and check out all the other stuff. They have a lot of great programs. Highly recommend them. I have a degree from there. My dad was the founding dean of the Billy Graham School there. And I used to mow the yard there. So if you like the grounds and you think the grounds are beautiful, which they are, I did that. Well, I did that in the 90s. So anyway, I'll take great options out there, even though it's not me. So
it is one of the great options. Yeah, Southern's good. I know a lot of Southern grads. They all seem to be pretty pleased with it. I too am pleased with my school, but that is definitely a very good option.
They didn't sponsor. So
they didn't. They should. They should do it. All right. So let's talk about getting canned, getting fired. It's a tough thing. It does happen in churches. What we got to, we're talking generally, and from your point of view, Sam, it was an unjust thing. From other people, if you're like I don't know if you're a layperson listening to the show, one of the things that's really hard for some lay people to grasp is that people do get fired from churches. And it's not a lifetime appointment. These positions, they end the same way any other hirings end. So what we're trying to do is, for those of you, we're just going to operate for the purposes of this show and assume it was an unjust situation. You didn't do anything wrong. And now you have to kind of go forward with your career as a minister with that sort of marking on your resume. So what are some strategies and some ways to overcome that and to recuperate afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, first step is like just some self-awareness. Was this warranted or not? Like if you had received multiple written warnings and reprimands and documentation, and there was a whole human resource process through all of this, and then they let you go after you just didn't do what you were supposed to do, well, that's a whole different story than there was this power group and I just got thrown into a meeting, had no idea what was going on. Next thing I know, I didn't have a job. So those are completely different things. So one, let's have some self-awareness as to what part we need to own. Yes, in my case, it was unjust, but I could also look back and go, you know what? There's some things I should have seen coming. Like there's some things that I probably could have dealt with. Armchair quarterbacking, 20/20 hindsight, I get all that. And you always kind of what if yourself when you're in these situations. But like you mentioned, sometimes things just happen and people get fired, and it's just you got to move on. It happens in the corporate world. You can be bitter and you can kind of stew in your own regret, or like a lot of people should do. Maybe not everybody, but like a lot of people should do, move on to the next thing. So yeah, that's the first step. Self-awareness, was the action warranted? Now I'm going to go out and say that in most cases with the church, it's an unjust firing. Very few churches actually go through a process, do what they're supposed to do, that have some sort of human resource framework with all of this. It's just like this power group decides one day that they don't like you for what it could be for something that you're doing wonderfully. They just don't like you, and then you're gone. So yeah, we're going to approach this from the perspective of an unjust firing. But I still think that even if you find yourself in these situations, I would start with your spiritual health, your emotional health, and seek out a professional counselor, seek out mentors, seek out friends. I think that's step one. Is I need to surround myself with some good people who can help me. You did that for me. That's how we really became friends. Was because you heard about my situation. To this day I don't know how you heard about it, but and you were like, Sam, come preach. Sam, hey, come out to Texas. And, to use a Texas idiom, we'll get you back up on the horse. I think I'm saying that correctly, but I don't ride horses. But you did that for me. And so you were one of those people that I needed in my orbit to help me through it.
Yeah, I've just always had a very soft space in my heart and in my mind toward how hard it is to get jobs in churches, and how people make things more difficult, and how poorly people, quite honestly, people get bossed or led. We're talking about unjust situations. I'm reminded of a situation I was aware of here recently where, a student minister just got let go just because, they just determined didn't want the guy around anymore. He didn't do anything wrong. In fact, that's one of the hardest things about church world is sometimes people will get terminated and it's like, hey, they did nothing wrong. We think they're awesome. We fired them. And it leaves your heart and your soul in this very twisted spot where it's like, well, now I don't even know what to improve upon. I can't really rationalize the idea that I did nothing wrong. And still, somebody who's supposed to be operating under the tenets of Christ just trashed me. And I think those things are unjust. And I would just make a side note here. If you're bossing, or if you're leading a church or an organization, if at all possible, if somebody hasn't done anything wrong, but they're just not maybe a good fit, then use a transition plan. I'm a big fan of like, hey, you've got 6 months. Let's try to find you a better place where you fit better in the next 6. It's just not going to work here. But this whole like just terminating people, and then even if you give them a severance, which we'll talk about here in a moment, but even if you give them a severance, you're still putting a black mark on their resume. And a timeline in the severance world. Like churches will be like, well, we gave them a generous 3-month severance. Which I'm always like, yeah, but it takes like 6 months to get hired on at a church, anywhere from start to finish, from conversation to hiring. And so unless you're willing to do like a year, I think a lot of that is unjust. And you're exactly right, man. Find a counselor, find a mentor, get in those conversations, reach out to people, and just say, hey, I just need to have regular conversations because I'm in a tough spot right now. And I don't want to go down a dark way. And I would tell you, like, reach out to other pastors, local pastors, those kind of things. Almost all of us would drop everything to help you out in that way. So if the first one says no, ask another one, and just do that for your own good.
Yeah, I echo that thought. There are plenty of pastors. If you find yourself in this situation, or if you happen to be listening to this because you were Googling and you landed on this episode, likely there's a number of pastors in your area that are willing to work with you, help you, talk to you, because they've been through it too. Myself included. But let's talk about the severance, because maybe some people differ with me on that, and it's fine. But I say ask for as big a severance as you can. Seek out the most that you can get for the longest time period. Particularly if it's an unjust firing. If a church is just going to completely is going to treat you horribly, then you might as well give yourself as much cushion as you can to find that next position. Now, I'm not advocating loving money or anything like that, or using something as leverage to get more out of them. I'm not saying that, but a lot of churches will give 6 months severance when people do really stupid things, evil things even. And then they'll let somebody go that like didn't do anything wrong, and they're like, "Well, we'll give you 30 days." It's like, why do the people that really mess up badly, that probably shouldn't get anything, end up with the longer severance packages than the ones that like, "Well, I didn't do anything wrong." They took my benefits package away when I got fired. Like, I was like, "What on earth?" I was like, health insurance and retirement and all that, and so I'm a big fan of, if they'll give it to you, accept it. Like, and don't be afraid to ask for it.
Yeah, and I agree that the problem is, and this is just the reality of the situation. I'll just tell you what's going on here, and you know this, Sam, but our listeners may not know this. These groupings that make up these sort of decisions, when they're trying to terminate somebody who is a problem, is a big fit thrower, is going to cause a lot of chaos, they want to appease that person. They're trying to appease them, and so they're like, "We'll give you a whole year severance if you'll just go away. Please just go away." That kind of thing. And please don't hurt us so much when you leave. I always find that ironic because they're going to do it anyways. They're going to trash you. You give them the year of severance, they're still going to trash you. That kind of stuff. But then they've got these kind and Christ-like people, and maybe it's just a downturn in the finances, or they just don't think it's a good fit anymore, and they're like, "Well, they're not going to cause any problem, so here's 30 days," that kind of stuff. So you got to understand that that's what's going on, and so ask for more. What I would just say, look, hey, man, I accept. This is God's will. God is in charge. God's provident. Even if you're being unjust, I would like at least 6 months severance. It takes at least 6 months from the day you start to get hired on in church. And I would tell them that. So in that case, I want 8 months, because it's going to take me 8 months to get a job. And even more so now, because I have to put a termination date on my resume that is earlier. And so you've put me against the wall. You're saying I didn't do anything wrong. You're publicly telling the church this is just a parting of ways. Well, this is the parting of ways, and so this is what I would like. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you should stand up and do the best you can in that situation. But, don't let it affect your identity if you don't get it. But definitely ask.
Agree. 6 months is a good target. More if you can, but 6 months would be a baseline for me, with full benefits, by the way.
Yep.
Full pay package. So you're also going to discover your friends through this ordeal. I certainly did. Everyone was telling me, "Oh, Sam, just hang on," because my church had grown. The church where I was at had grown from 900 to like 1,400 in 18 months. We had 300 college students there, so everyone starts talking like, "Oh, you just keep doing what you're doing. And you're going to be the next," and then fill in the blank, whatever it is.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I get fired, and all of a sudden, all these people that were singing my praises, they're not returning my phone calls. And you figure out quickly, okay, it's the 200 people that I thought were in my corner, it's actually like 6 people. And,
right.
That hurts. But that's what you will find out.
Yeah. I don't really have much to add to this, but you're going to find that out. And so what I tell my sons is, you're not entitled to more than one friend. There's no, you might sit there. There's a thing where we just want everybody to be our friend. And the reality is, if you've got one good one, you got a friend. And that's what, and sometimes it doesn't feel like you got one good one. So, once you find that out, actually, I would encourage you to just kind of flip that around and understand that God has given you an opportunity there to really recognize who it is you can count on. Because you're right, Sam, when you're pastoring that big old church and your Twitter account is blowing up and everybody knows your name and all that kind of stuff, man, you got everybody calling you up. But the second you don't want to go down that path anymore, you don't hear from those same people, and you find out who your friends are. You really do.
I would also recommend starting the search process immediately. I know that's not for everybody, and I know that some experience trauma and need a break from ministry. I'm going to exclude that group from what I'm about to say. Like, if that's you, like, hey, I can't do this anymore. I need to get some help. I'm hurt. I'm too hurt to continue. Fair enough. That is a legitimate place to be. You just can't stay there. You got to work through it. But let's assume that you can continue. And I strongly encourage people in this situation. This is what I did. I took one day to decompress. I took one day. Then I sent an email the very next day, like within 48 hours of being fired, and said, here's what's happened. I sent it to my network. And I said, I'm looking for a job. Here's my resume. I had the resume ready to go. And I started day one to decompress. Day two, I started the search process. Not everyone's geared like me, and not everyone can do that. But man, the sooner you can start the search process, the better off you're going to be. And, don't be afraid to tell people exactly what happened. Don't be afraid to say, you don't have to sugarcoat it. You can say, here's the situation. I got fired. Here's what I know. Here's what they told me. Here's what they didn't tell me. And just put that out there, because you're going to be far better by being upfront, quick, and telling the truth.
Yeah, and I'm sure you would agree with me, Sam. Most of the time when you get to the situation where, especially if you're in the lead role, if you get to the situation where you're going to get fired or you get to a forced resignation, the clouds have been building for a while. So I would actually encourage you to start before you get fired, which doesn't mean you're necessarily putting your resume out, but you want to talk to your network. You want to talk to your friends, your buddies. You want to reach out to some possible positions out there. Just wrap your mind around the reality of maybe not being in this role very much longer. And so you start those conversations like, guys, this is what's happening here. It may come to me kind of stepping away from this. Or being fired. I don't know. I mean, there's some people that are being pretty mean and, that kind of stuff. And then you just kind of reach out. That'll help grease those wheels quite a bit there. Recognize, look, lots of people get fired. We all have church hurt. Pastors have more church hurt than any member has ever had. Pastors have more church hurt than any podcast creators out there have ever even thought about having. We have a lot of church hurt. And so, go ahead and understand, look, the church didn't hurt you. That couple deacons or that couple committee members or that whatever, they're the ones that hurt you. Now, let's pick it up. Let's go forward. We're going to work this thing out. So yes, I agree. Start a little bit before, but if you didn't see it coming, get that out there. I would also say one other little tip here, Sam. If you do have a network, and you should always have a network. This is why you have a network. But if you do have a little network there, sometimes you can reach out to maybe another local, larger church or something like that and say, hey, man, I need a transitional place to be honest with you, for my resume. Is there any way I can put my start? Can I come over and help you out in any role you want? I'll be the associate minister to the regional manager. That kind of just made up title. And a lot of times churches, other pastors and networks will help you out in those ways and just say, yeah, come on over. We'll give you a role to kind of do. It might be a non-paid gig. And sometimes with your severance, you may want it to be a non-paid gig. So it might be a little non-paid, but that helps your resume not have a gap in it. And that's a suggestion that I've made for people before is just go over there and help them out for a non-paid role, but it puts a thing on your resume.
Time to call in the favors. It's time to cash in the chips or the chits. I never say that correctly, but it's time to cash in on favors. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's you find yourself in a difficult spot. Call people that are willing to help you, and if there's somebody that can help bridge a gap, let them do it. Those are things that you need to do, particularly if you have a family. Consider your family. It's not the right time to be the idealist, right? Or I'm just waiting on the Lord. It's like, no, you need to move. Like, you need to do something, and do what God tells you to do. Of course, follow the Spirit, right. But sitting around and moping is not going to help you. So, you call in those favors, and then lastly, and I think this is a good point. Consider this time period in your life as an opportunity to change geography or change your position. Now, that may not be what you want to do. It may not be what you're called to do, but it is a consideration. That's what I did. I got let go from my previous church. It was in Tennessee. Was I ever going to be in Tennessee long term? Probably not. Was I ever going to be in
Right.
that small town long term? Probably not. I'm not Southern, and I'm not a small town guy. I am a Midwestern-ish city boy who's got some time spent in Florida. So I was like, you know what? I probably need to find, if I can, a better match, just like on paper, outside the calling of God, just on paper, a better match for me, which is exactly what I did. I ended up in a more urban area in Southwest Florida, here at West Bradenton. And let me tell
Which
you,
is not the same as Southeast, like Tennessee or Arkansas.
no,
Southeastern
yeah,
culture. It's totally
the
different.
further south you go on the west side of Florida, the
Yeah.
further up the Midwest you go. We're more like Michigan, Ohio, or Minnesota than we are the South. And on
Yeah.
the East Coast side, it's more like New England. Although that's changing. Florida's just getting everyone. But regardless, I kind of knew myself, and I was like, you know what? I really need to be most focused on these areas. Like I focused on big cities. It's like I can't do another small town. I'm not gonna thrive in another small town. So I used the opportunity to change my geography. I didn't change my position. I stayed a lead pastor because I knew that. I knew I was going to need to be a lead pastor. So I was like, my kids are young enough to where it's not going to matter to them. My oldest was 5 years old at that point. So goodness, she turns 15. She's going to be turning 15. So anyway, consider the interim as an opportunity to change. It's a good time to do it.
Yeah. Totally agree. I think that's a great time to reevaluate. And I always think, no matter when you're making the transition, really think through what kind of role, what kind of city, those kind of things, and then just shoot out that resume and call the network. But yeah.
And hopefully hopefully you're listening to this episode and you're not in that situation and you're in a better place.
Yeah.
So I hope you're not listening to this episode because you Googled, what do I do when I'm fired? I really hope not. But what I do hope you do is to call church teams. We mentioned them earlier in the podcast. We will also let you know about them now. They have great church management software. Hear all the time from people who listen to the show that made the switch to church teams, and they say, you know what? This was a very good switch for us. So they do just about anything. They've got a full slate of software programs, whether it be giving or texting, websites. They kind of just do it all. And it's a scalable system. It's a scalable model for churches. So if you're a smaller church, then you can afford it. And if you're a larger church, they have the full slate of offerings that you need. So go.churchteams.com. Go.churchteams.com. Thank you, church teams.
Thank you, church teams. Thank you, Southern Seminary. And thank you, listener, for listening to this show. We pray that your search is going well, and that we'll catch you next week.